Welcome in to another episode of SEC Mafia football podcast. We are in the off season. Tonight we will be doing our third season review. We've got four new teams to break down, grade, talk about their highs and lows. We'll get right into it. Tyler, what's up, man? How are things going?
Nothing much. I'm being disheartened by all the schools that are canceling spring ball this upcoming year because they don't want tampering and whatnot. But disheartened with spring ball. But good thing that I think most SEC schools are still having spring practice and spring games.
So I've been hearing some rumblings with the NIL, the transfer portal. College football is migrating, whether we like it or not, more and more towards the NFL game.
Yep.
And I keep hearing rumblings about how spring football is in the near future going to be completely cut out, and that you could see schools start practicing 2 to 3 weeks earlier in fall camp, starting around mid-July instead of the 1st of August, and actually scheduling like an FCS game that first week is sort of like a preseason game, sort of like the NFL does, and then they could have like a week during the summer to have an OTA and different things like that. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. I know as an Alabama fan, going back to Saban's first year when 90,000 packed Bryant-Denny Stadium, that sort of made spring football for the University of Alabama a tradition, a newer tradition, but it's still a large tradition. And on any given year, you've got 50, 60,000 that still go to their spring game. I don't know. It just holds a special place in my heart. But I mean, I guess I could see either way of it.
It's hard to think of college football moving towards that just because these guys are still, student athletes. And so if you look at the model that a lot of people are trying to propose, they're trying to do a 10-day window for the portal to open up about the time that the NFL has their draft, bypassing spring practice, going straight into summer workouts, and then, like you said, starting fall practice 2 or 3 weeks earlier. It's hard for me to think that they would be able to transfer that late in the semester of April or whatnot, which I know towards the end is later, but that takes into a big account of what you have to think about when all this is.
Well, the coaches voted unanimously, and which has still got to go before the rules committee and all that, but they actually voted unanimously to do away with every transfer portal except for the one in January.
Mm-hmm.
And so if that passes, there would only be a 10-day window in January after everybody's season has ended. And to me, that just makes sense anyway. I don't like the fact that if you the deeper you go in the playoffs, the more the deck is stacked against you for the next season.
Yep.
You look at Notre Dame and Ohio State, their season ended almost a month after everybody else, except for the other two semifinal teams. And then when the season ended, their roster could be plucked from for 5 extra days while everybody else's window is closed. Let's do away with all those stupid rules, put everybody on the same playing field. The transfer portal should not open for anybody until everybody's season is over, and it should close on the same day and run for the same amount.
Absolutely. Got to be some sort of evening out when it comes to transfer portal, NIL, things like that.
Right, and I know we keep saying the NFL and comparisons and this and that, but it's not like in the NFL that free agency opens for 5 teams this week, and then next week it's open for 5 more teams.
No.
It's stupid. There should be one period to where everybody can transfer in or out, and it should have nothing to do with when your season ended and all that. It just doesn't make any sense.
That's exactly right. Moving along, this is our social media information. You can pause the video right now, give us a like and a follow on all these pages. Share it with your friends. Get us out there. I know it's the off season. There's not much to do. It is streaming season. It's Netflix and chill season. So come on, what better way to chill than with the SEC Mafia episode? You heard it here, folks.
The SEC Mafia Facebook page, we stay pretty active on that, usually once or twice a week. We try to engage in some discussion with everyone, whether it be who was your favorite player that you followed growing up, what are some of the greatest moments that you remember growing up, whatever. So give us a follow on that SEC Mafia group page. Share that out. Take 2 or 3 minutes. Hit that share button, go down through your contacts and send that out, and let's get more people. The more people we get, the deeper dialogue we can have and the better discussions we can have on that.
Absolutely. And so we begin with our rankings. Mr. Randy?
Tennessee Volunteers. Tennessee 10-3, 6-2 in the SEC. They were a 2024 participant. For the playoffs, about all we can say is their fans did a really good job of going and taking over Columbus, Ohio for a couple of days. Once the game started, that pretty much ended the excitement of that. I think up until this point, though, as a whole, I think they have to be satisfied and excited about the direction of their program under Josh Heupel. They've been on a very good run. They beat, Alabama 2 of the last 3 years. I know there's a lot of satisfaction in that after losing 17 or 16 straight to Alabama. So they've got some good things going. Still got to get over that Georgia hurdle, beating Georgia with Kirby Smart. Josh Heupel's got to get over that. Did make the playoffs. I'm sure they would like to be in Atlanta playing for an SEC championship, winning an SEC championship. But all in all, I think they're in a good place right now.
Yeah, their program is definitely took a 180 under the helm of Josh Heupel. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. They've got to be excited for the upcoming years. With him at the helm,
I mean, I know it's no Butch Jones and Derek Dooley. I know they don't have a guy wearing the orange khakis, but hey, they're progressing, right? They're ascending.
But to have the success that you have with a freshman at the helm of quarterback, I think you can be excited as he starts to mature and grow into that role for his next 2 years with Tennessee. I think they're high. Go ahead. What were you about to say?
I was supposed to say, what's your high point?
I think their high this season has to be making it to the playoffs. First time ever being in any sort of college football playoff. And a little side note for my high, I think that their offense is just going to continue to improve. I mean, they were averaging 35 points a game, 447 yards of offense. The only thing that they need to improve on, and I'm not even going to include this in the low, was penalties. I mean, they tallied a total of 105 penalties for like 897 yards this season. So a little bit undisciplined. Fix those in the offseason, and I like we've said countless times before, I think that they're going to have a great future with Josh Heupel there.
So what would you say if I told you in 6 SEC games this year, they failed to score under 30 points for a Josh Heupel offense? They really did it. They really did it with defense, and their offensive numbers were a little bit inflated by 69 points at Chattanooga, 51 against North Carolina State, 71 points against Kent State. For the most part in SEC games, they really averaged about 26, 27 points per game, which is low for a Josh Heupel offense. But I think that also shows maturity and growth on his part to be able to see what kind of team he had. He saw the defense, he saw that defensive line, and he said, I'm not going to really press on the offensive side of the ball and lose games. I'm going to play to the strengths of my team. So I think he did a really, really nice job of coaching this team this year. For me, the highest of the high this season is going to be the Oklahoma game. And I know Oklahoma, 6-7, we'll get to them later. But at the time, Oklahoma had some momentum. It was early in the season. They didn't have all the injuries and things that they had. And for Heupel to go back into Oklahoma, where he played, where he was a legend at, and to be able to take a team in there and win, I know there was a lot of satisfaction for him in that game. So for me, that's the highest of the highs this year.
Mm-hmm. What's your low?
There's only 2 that it can be.
Mm-hmm.
It's either Arkansas or Ohio State.
Yeah.
After you beat Oklahoma to turn around after a bye week and go into Arkansas and only put up 14 points and lose had to be the lowest of the lows for me.
For me, it was It was allowing emotions to run rampant and get the best of you before a playoff game. Coming out on the field with your shirts off in, teens weather up in the north, trying to make yourself seem tough and strong. Like, we get it. I understand. But I think they came into the game too emotional, and with football, you can't play too emotional. It's good to have emotions. It's good to use those emotions and you know, fuel your intensity on the field. But when you play too emotional, well, then you get butt hurt here, and then you start getting in your head. And I think that being curb stomped in the playoffs by Ohio State was their low.
And I also think they went into that game seeing the last time Ohio State was on the field, seeing them lose to Michigan,
Michigan.
a little bit overconfident. And like you said, they came out on the field, no shirts. Cold doesn't bother us. We've got probably 20,000 fans here in this place, and they're behind us. I think if they would be honest with us all, they would tell us that there were some things they would have liked to have done different leading up to that game.
Yep, they sure would. Final grade. I gave them an A minus.
I agree. I give them an A minus. I wanted to say just a solid A, but losing on the road at Arkansas and the way it ended at Ohio State, I said an A minus as well.
Yep, 92, solid 92. Missouri Tigers, the Fighting Eli Drinkwitzes, 10-3 for the year, 5-3 in the SEC. Beat Iowa in the Music City Bowl this year, 27-24. Randy,
Yeah, I mean a good season. I think Eli Drinkwitz has kind of put people on notice a little bit. Back-to-back 10-win seasons. When Missouri first got into the SEC, they had a little bit of success. They won the East 2 years in a row. Since then, they've just kind of been mid-tier at best. And the last couple of years, Eli Drinkwitz has really escalated them. Going into the season, based on their schedule, they were one of those kind of sexy, dark horse playoff prediction teams where a lot of people were predicting them to make the playoffs. Again, I thought they had a really good season. 2 games kind of stick out to where things sort of got away from them. Texas A&M and then at Alabama. But, other than that, they did lose to South Carolina by 4, but there's no shame in losing at South Carolina by 4. But, just an overall good season. The one thing that this season really lacked, there was really no signature win. There was no real win that you look at and was like, man, that was just a real impressive win. And for the most part, it was because they didn't have the opportunities. And that's why they were a preseason darling pick, was because of their schedule. They only ended up playing 2 ranked teams, or teams that were ranked at the end of the season, Alabama and South Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they sort of underachieved. For me, the highest of highs this season is just going to be going for 10 wins back to back. They beat Ohio State in a bowl game last year. This year they go 9-3. They beat Iowa in a bowl game. They get to back 10 wins. For the most part, I think 10 wins will get you into the playoffs. You just need to go 10-2, not pick up that 10th win as a bowl win. But I'm going to say my highs for them is going back to back 10 wins. What about you?
That's funny because we didn't talk about this one in our meeting. I know you probably can't see it. I said back-to-back 10-win seasons as well. That was my high.
What's your low?
My low is going to be the beatdown of epic proportions in Bryant-Denny Stadium by the Alabama Crimson Tide, 34-0. Yes, they were without their starting running back, but you still had Brady Cook, who was semi-healthy from the ankle injury the week prior, and you had Luther Burton, who got shut down. They only had 3.8 yards of play that game, 3 interceptions. That was really the game that Alabama's defensive backs really started to come together, really started to flow. That was the outbringing of the defense for Alabama, and the week prior at Tennessee, but that week specifically as well.
Yeah, again, I guess you could say Texas A&M, but I'm going to say the Alabama game as well, and just kind of add a little bit of extra flavor there, and stress the fact that they were shut out.
Yeah.
Eli Drinkwitz is an offensive-minded coach. Brady Cook, yes, he was kind of, he had a nagging ankle injury, but he came back the week before against Auburn, led a second half comeback. They end up winning the game. He plays first half against Alabama. To be shut out with the receivers that those guys have says a lot. There's really just not much of an excuse for that.
No.
Final grade for me, just when I look at their schedule and think, man, they really didn't play the upper echelon of teams. They dodged Georgia, they dodged Ole Miss, they dodged LSU, they dodged Tennessee, they dodged Texas. There was really no reason for them to not be a playoff team. I know they had some nagging injuries. I'm going to say just a solid B. And I hate to be that critical of a 10-win team, but if you take out South Carolina, Alabama, and Texas A&M, they played nobody. So I'm going to say just a solid B.
And so when I was looking at this, I'm on the same boat. Their schedule lined it up for them to have a great and successful season and to make the playoffs. But the only benefit of the doubt that I gave them was that their preseason ranking was almost, like hitting a nail on the head. Their preseason ranking had them predicted to finish 5th in the SEC, and technically they did. They finished tied for 5th, with 4 other teams, but that technicality is stipulated with them actually finishing 7th with the loss to Bama and the loss to South Carolina and other things. So they finished 7th, but technically tied 5th based upon record in the SEC. I gave them just a B plus. I said 87-ish, 87.5. 10-win seasons back to back. But like you said, the quality of opponent that they played this year wasn't the greatest.
I think if you give Alabama, Ole Miss, LSU, South Carolina, if you give any of those 4 teams Missouri's schedule, they're playoff teams.
They're 11 wins, I think. 11, maybe even undefeated.
It's possible.
It's possible with their schedule. Yeah, it's possible. It is.
It's possible. I mean, again, not to beat a dead horse, but look at their non-conference schedule.
Oh gosh,
Murray State, Buffalo, Boston College.
Yeah. I mean,
UMass. So I mean, very, very, one of the easier schedules in the SEC.
I don't know. Bill O'Brien had them Boston College boys right.
The Fighting Bill O'Briens are on the uptick. They're another one of those schools that have an SEC transfer from Alabama taking over at quarterback this year. Of course, we've seen what Eli Holstein did at Pittsburgh, so you might want to look out for the Fighting Bill O'Briens.
It just hurts that they lost Castellanos or whatever his last name is because
to Florida State.
Yep,
to Florida State. Come get you some Gus Malzahn.
There you go.
Gus Malzahn be back in the SEC coaching against SEC teams in Alabama and Florida next year. So be interesting. Moving ahead to Oklahoma, 6-7, year 3 under Brent Venables. They have went 6-7, 10 wins, back to 6-7. Kind of getting to the point for Brent Venables that I think the Oklahoma faithful are going to want to see a little bit of something out of him in year 4. The transition for them moving to the SEC, definitely not as smooth as Texas, but I will say the schedule makers did not do them the favor that they did Texas either. They had a much more brutal schedule in playing Tennessee. Of course, they played Texas, but they also played South Carolina, Ole Miss, Missouri, Alabama, several ranked teams, played LSU, so much tougher schedule.
Yeah. And I think the elephant in the room, no pun intended, for their highest of high is got to be beating Alabama this year, and the way that beatdown ensued at home. When all the cards are on the table for Alabama to just win this game and win their next 2, and they're in the SEC championship and they're in the playoffs, guaranteed, and the way that they just dominated and shut down Alabama's offense, that's the highest of the high for them this year.
No doubt. They caught a couple breaks in that game as well. Alabama had a touchdown that was reviewed. It was determined Ryan Williams had stepped out of bounds, so that brought it back, and Alabama had to settle for a field goal. And then, of course, Ryan Williams made probably what was the catch of the year on a fourth down. That was overturned. I don't think Alabama would have come back, but you never know. There was still 14 minutes to go in the game. They could have caught momentum. But when I look through their 6 wins, we try to come up with different highs and different lows, so we're not just saying the same thing. There's really not another one.
There's not.
They beat Maine, they beat Auburn, they beat Tulane, Houston, and Temple. Other than an Alabama win, there just wasn't much on the menu. So that's going to be my highest of highs. What's your lowest of low for them?
I said the atrocity of the game at home against South Carolina this year when they lost 35-9. When you go into a home game, that should be the game where you feel most confident. You're at home, you're comfortable, you don't have to sit on a 2-hour plane ride after a game, you don't have to hurry up and scarf down a sandwich after the game. You can undress, unwind, go right to your dorm, go wherever, relax. You don't have to have a escort or anything like that. It's nothing major for pre-game operations, things like that. And to go into that game and have 6 fumbles, 4 that were lost in turnovers, and 2 interceptions, and lose the way that they did to South Carolina, that was the lowest of low for me.
So Oklahoma, if I'm looking at this correctly, has 7 Heisman Trophy winners. They have 29 players and coaches that are inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame. They hold the record for the longest win streak in Division I history with 47 straight victories. They're the only program to have 4 different coaches win more than 100 games, and they have 7 national championships. Without thinking about the question that I'm about to answer, I want you to spit out yes or no as quickly as possible. Is Oklahoma a blue blood?
Yes.
Bro, you completely went against the grain there when I said as quick as possible, and then you took like a 10-second pause. But anyway, I agree with you. Oklahoma is a blue blood.
It's hard not to pause and think because we like to think before we talk. I mean, you're throwing all these facts, and you're just like.
But I was throwing the facts for a reason because I was painting a picture. I was doing my best. Not Beethoven. Who was one of those famous painters? Michelangelo.
Picasso. I like it.
Picasso. Yeah, Picasso. Yeah. So I was painting my picture here. So Oklahoma's a blue blood.
Yes.
My lowest of low is the Alabama game. Don't rush the field if you are a blue blood. You seem so desperate, especially when you hand a team their 3rd loss, to rush the field. Don't get me wrong. I'm all for a good field storming. When you are a mid-tier team, when Vanderbilt upsets Alabama, storm the field. But when you are a blue blood with 7 national championships, 7 Heisman winners, and the list just goes on and on and on, you got no business rushing the field. You have no business rushing the field. So my lowest of the lows is when the Oklahoma Sooners and their fan base stormed the field after handing a team their 3rd loss.
That's fair. That's fair. What's your final grade?
Randy? That's me, man. I'm just a picture of a fair and unbiased opinion here on the SEC Mafia podcast.
We know you are.
My final grade, when you look at Oklahoma come off of a 10-win season in which they competed for a Big 12 championship, rode that momentum into the SEC. Yes, I know they had injuries. Yes, I know they shuffled offensive linemen and they were down to their 5th, 6th, 7th wide receivers. I get all that. But it's hard not to say that they really underachieved. C+.
I said straight C. I said 75. When you looked at the preseason polls, everyone was high on Oklahoma this year. They thought they were going to come in and storm the SEC and finish 8th overall, and they finished 14th. So, yeah, They made a bowl game. They lost in the bowl game to Navy. They beat Alabama. But if you look at all the ranked opponents that they faced, Texas, South Carolina, Alabama, they only beat one. And then there was just no meat on the bone for the rest of their schedule this year. And so I just went with a straight C, 75.
I mean, 10-point double-digit loss to Tennessee. Got beat by 31 to Texas.
Yep.
South Carolina beat them by 26. Ole Miss beat them by 12.
Yep.
LSU beat them by 20, and then they lose to Navy. I could understand with the injuries and stuff, having a lackluster season, but getting blown out so many times and their defense just giving up so many points throughout the season. And Brett Venables supposed to be a defensive guy. I just say straight C.
Yeah, straight C. Nothing special. Last up on the dinner plate today, we have the Auburn Tigers.
Brother Hugh Freeze.
5-7 on the year. 2-6 in the SEC.
Brother Hugh.
Brother Hugh. Yeah. I don't even know.
Once again, I'm sure we have to have the same high. Just going back and looking through their schedule. Win against Alabama A&M. Win against New Mexico. Win against Kentucky. Win against La Monroe, and then a win against Texas A&M. Texas A&M has to be the high of the high. I mean, that at the time Texas A&M was ranked, Texas A&M at the time still controlled their own destiny to go to Atlanta and play for an SEC championship game. So I think that was definitely the high of the high for me, was the overtime win versus Texas A&M.
Yeah, I think my high is going to be the Kentucky game. When our brother Hugh, learned how to utilize a running back, possibly the greatest running back in the SEC this season, besides Dylan Sampson. That's going to be my high, is brother Hugh putting pride aside and running the ball against Kentucky.
Right. That was the game which Darqueze Hunter went for nearly 300 yards.
Yeah, and 3 tutties, I think. Low ties into that. This season was a constant low between Hugh Freeze throwing blame on players and Hugh Freeze not utilizing Darqueze Hunter and them losing Darqueze Hunter to the NFL this year. That's my low.
My low is the Oklahoma game. Auburn has the lead. They have the ball. They're driving. All they need is another first down or two. And on 3rd and 2 in Oklahoma territory, they call an RPO. And what I didn't like about that was after the game, Hugh Freeze says, well, I wanted him to give it. He should have never thrown the ball. Well, how about call a straight run play? Don't call a play in which the quarterback has an option to throw it if you don't want him to throw the ball. Yeah. I really believe if they hand Darqueze Hunter the ball 2 times there, they bleed the clock out and they win. And their season could have been completely different than what it was this year.
You won't believe what happened on the 2 plays prior to that interception. They handed the ball off, and Darqueze Hunter averaged 10 yards, both carries, got first downs both times. And then they decided to do that and put the entire game in the quarterback's hands to where post-game conference you said, oh, I wanted him to hand it off. That's why I said my low was right there.
Call that inside zone, outside zone, stretch, power, counter, something without a pass option on the end of it.
Yeah, that was terrible coaching.
Well, hang on before you get to final thoughts and rush us out of here now. What's your overall grade for
F? I give them an F. No, I'm just playing. Preseason, they were supposed to finish 11th. They finished 13th. They didn't finish last. I guess we could put that in a high for Auburn. I'm not bashing Auburn or the program or the fans. The fans feel the same way that we do. They're tired of it. They just want to change. I gave them a D+, 68.
When you look at Auburn, who goes 5-7, 5 turnovers at Cal, easily could have won the game. 5 turnovers or 6 turnovers against Arkansas, easily could have won the game. Could have beat Oklahoma. Vanderbilt, they only scored 7 points. I mean, really and truly, you could take, and I know you could do this for every team, but you could take about 10 plays and change those. And Auburn's a fringe playoff team.
You're looking at a 9-3 Auburn team based upon about a handful of
You are,
plays.
and I think that's why the grade has to be a little bit harsh. Losing to Cal, losing to Arkansas the way you did, losing to Oklahoma the way you did, losing to Missouri the way you did, muffing a punt, giving Missouri. I mean, there was just so much. I know several Auburn fans that I talked to after that Vanderbilt game. The running joke amongst Auburn fans I talked to was that this team was finding new ways to lose every week, and it seemed like
And
they
that's the
had a
thing.
lead going into the fourth quarter and would just find a way to blow it.
That's the name of their season is they could not finish. They couldn't finish anything. And they couldn't finish drives. They couldn't finish fourth quarter games. I mean, they had the lead against Oklahoma. You had the lead against Missouri, had the lead against Vanderbilt, and they just couldn't finish these games. And like you said, there was a handful of plays that it comes down to. And ultimately, it's the head coach's responsibility to help these guys know how to finish these games. And I think that some of the coaching decisions that were made were just atrocious.
But based on the losses, the only decent win they had on the schedule was that Texas A&M win. I have to just give them a solid D for the season.
Well, about a 65, right, bro?
Solid 65.
Solid.
Solid 65. Hey, D's get degrees.
I guess so. Not in my profession, but yeah, hey, D's get degrees somewhere.
Well, as long as you don't just have too many of them, you can get a few D's on there. And
yeah, you can. I guess you can. Now we have come to everyone's favorite segment of the evening. This is final thoughts on SEC Mafia.
for me, my final thoughts, and this is something that I'm trying to do better on myself. This is for all fans.
Here we go. A little
Here we
self
go.
help. A little self help therapy.
Deep thoughts with Randy. Okay.
Oh, here we go. Here we go.
Breathe deep, inhale, and just chill out. Okay. We are in a fast generation to where if McDonald's doesn't have my Happy Meal in 2 minutes, I'm mad. If my TV buffers for 10 seconds, I'm mad. If everything is not just instant and right now, I'm mad. And we carry that over into our fandom. And again, I'm speaking to myself here. We are so quick to crown someone a champion. We're so quick to throw somebody under the bus. When Kalen DeBoer beat Georgia, he was the greatest thing since sliced bread. Nick Saban, who glad Nick was gone. We got this high flying offensive guy here. Then the next week they lose to Vanderbilt, and the guy sucks. He can't coach. We're so wishy washy, and we need to just realize that when you're building programs, or when these coaches are building programs, it's a marathon, not a sprint. We live in the day and time now to where everybody's going to lose a couple games a season. Everybody in the SEC lost 2 games this year. We just got to relax. We've got to chill, not be so quick to have a knee-jerk reaction to want everybody benched, want everybody fired, and throw everybody under the bus. Because we are living in a new age of college football to where we're just not going to see the 13, 14, and 15 and 0 dominant teams anymore.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So just everybody relax. Quit being so knee-jerk about everything. Quit overreacting to everything.
Overreacting.
Yep.
My final thought for this week. Do you think, because it's already in motion and already in discussion, do you think that a non-SEC school schedule hurts or helps the SEC cause?
How much longer you want this podcast to go?
Well, it's called Final Thoughts for a reason. Unless, and here's what makes me say this is there's already talks in motion from Sankey and the Big Ten commissioner and the College Football Playoff Committee that after next year, We're expanding to 16 teams. And there's being talks of trying to get a set number of Big Ten teams and a set number of SEC school teams in every year. But there's one stipulation, and their argument is the Big Ten has been playing 9 Big Ten games every year since 2016, and so now they want the SEC to do that.
So if you are telling me, in which I've heard the same arguments and the same stipulations the SEC and Big Ten are making, if you tell me 4 SEC teams are automatically going to get in, whether they're ranked first, second, third, and fourth, or whether they're ranked 21st, 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. If the 4 best SEC teams are not even ranked, 4 SEC teams are getting in, go to 9 games. I think that creates more compelling football. To me, the best season of college football that I have ever witnessed was the 2020 football season, when it was nothing but 10 straight SEC games. That was the best season ever. It was compelling matchups every week. You didn't have the Alabama versus Mercer. You didn't have the Georgia versus Georgia States, and you didn't have all that nonsense. If you go to 9 SEC games, and then you have the SEC Big Ten Challenge, like they're talking about having, to where that's 10 quality games, I'm all about that. I think that would be wonderful.
I do too, but the only argument is I'm all for it if it's guaranteed slots for the SEC and guaranteed slots for the Big Ten.
They will not go to 9 games if it's not guaranteed.
That's nobody will sign off on that. No, nobody at all in the SEC will sign off on that. I think, like you said, it makes more compelling matchups. It makes teams have to focus week in and week out for a longer period of time. Yes, I know you're saying, oh, it's just one more SEC game. SEC games are hard. SEC games are hard.
You take Texas this year with their Mickey Mouse schedule,
and they struggled on the road.
What if they would have had to have played one more SEC game and it was Ole Miss, or what if they had to play one more SEC game and it was South Carolina or
That's
LSU?
Exactly right.
So I mean, that's where the 9 games, it helps balances the schedule for SEC teams out, because this year you had teams like Missouri, Tennessee, Texas who benefited from a much weaker schedule than South Carolina, Alabama, and Ole Miss, who were fringe playoff teams.
That's exactly right. Well, that's all I have for you, man. All I have for you.
2 weeks, we will be back with the last review for the final 4 teams that we have got. Once we get through that, then we will be in full force. Turn the page. Number 24, we'll start looking at Boston breakdown. We'll start looking at spring practice, which, by the way, opens up in 1 week for several SEC teams.
Yep. So, hey, football season is upon us.
Home to 2025. Great day, great evening.
It is upon us again. We are back, people.
Mafia, Randy from Mobile, he's out. See you.